to begin. As we begin to sit, just briefly, like we usually do, to begin, I want you to consider, if you would, something that is very, very easy to take for granted. And that is that you have a seat to sit in. I mean, it seems like a simple thing. And I'm not even speaking about just the grand things about religious freedom, which is not a small thing. But they do have a safe place, a warm place, a dry place, a loving, welcoming place, and then a place to sit. And that right this moment you have a body with which to sit, which is an absolute and complete miracle in and of itself. Your brother-in-law woke up this morning and had a body, and then it fell away. At how old?
54.
54. So by this evening, I can't sit anymore. So thinking about their family, as well as all the families of all the people who have lost so many in the last week, some quite tragically and publicly, and some more quietly and personally. I have the strangest sensation of being in the next episode on Netflix or something. Because with this particular sutra, it's kind of like that, isn't it? Okay, what happens next? Are you finding it to be helpful or instructive or impactful in some way? It's very, very rich, even though it's full of irony and wit and unexpected twists and turns. It's very, very rich. One of the things that I am always curious about each time when we start class is how many mistakes I've made and how bad on the handout. Because no matter, I must be the world's worst editor, no matter how many times I look at it. I left the heading for last time on this one. But the quotes are new. You know, we're starting in section 8 of the sutra, in which the question arises about, Vimalakirti says, why did you come? You know, everyone finally arrives, and Manjushri says, okay, I'll do it. And everybody says, we're going to go along for the ride. They get there, and they start talking about why are you sick? You know, because the whole world is sick. And there are many, many teachings that come out of this. And did you come for the way, or did you come for a seat? Isn't that a great question? And that, of course, opens the whole question about what brings you to practice at all. And that's really what I would have entitled this one if I would have put a proper title on it. But I also could not avoid this wonderful old quote from Daniel Patrick Moynihan. You are entitled to your own opinions, but you're not entitled to your own facts. He's not even around now. Isn't that great?
Say that now.
I know. I thought it was perfect on election day. Our 1-year anniversary. They say. I have a couple of questions that you can use as practice, deepening questions, but first, let's look at this piece from Joan Sutherland's commentary regarding this question about did you come for the way or did you come for a seat? So as usual, let's enjoy each other's voices, and just like we were there with all the disciples and all the bodhisattvas, and those, everyone could have a voice. I'll begin this first little bit, and then we'll go on. So this question, she's referring to the question, did you come for the seat or did you come for the way? This is something we can ask ourselves. Which did you come for? And what are those seats? Do we come for happiness, wisdom, peace, escape, meaning, greater compassion, relief of suffering? Or do we come willing to follow the way wherever it leads us, even into the dodgy sick room with its sudden portal to other worlds? Such a beautiful description of what the sutra. Did you come with an agenda that you hope to satisfy? Or did you come open-hearted, open-minded, open-handed, willing to follow the way wherever it takes you, even into this world that we are startled by, horrified by, shocked and surprised by? Vimalakirti says we have to give up everything in order to seek the way, including the bedrock orthodoxies of Buddhism. Vimalakirti says that we have to be willing to give up our life, let alone a seat for the way. So this is sounding a bit hardcore in one way, because it's quite, it's uncompromising. You're saying you have to, this is a path of releasing, relinquishment, giving up, letting go, not a path of acquisition and protection and gaining. So it seems pretty almost harsh in some ways. Why would you do such a thing? Why would you do such a thing? Why would you hang around listening to stuff like this? Very few of you are. Most people decided not to come. You're the like geeky ones like me.
Something that just hit me with give up everything in order to seek the way. It's like it's not even for the way, it's just to even to seek it, like to just even open a little Dharma gate. It just.
And you could even quibble with the seeking. Because I think sometimes if you get caught in seeking, you become a seeker, and that even gets in the way of the way. So it's good that you point that out.
And there's no path in the sense of...
Yeah, ultimately there actually isn't a laid down path that you discover, like, oh, now I'm on it. I wasn't on it before. A path is simply a place that's worn out because other people have walked it. If we go further, if the way is something other than the teachings about the way, because most of us think the way is like the sutra, or the chants, or the dharma talks, or if the way is something other than the teachings about the way. So she's sounding like a Taoist here, isn't she? A lot more than a Buddhist. You can let fall away all the things you think the way is, or want it to be, or have been led to expect it is. I was saying when I was teaching in Minneapolis last week, I said, I think 95% of the work that I do as a Buddhist teacher is helping people realize what this is not. Really only a little time I'm teaching something. Most of it is addressing, no it's not that, no it's not that, no it's not that. If the way is something other than the teachings about the way, you can let fall away all the things you think the way is, or want it to be, or have been led to expect it. You accept the condition of seatlessness and stand on the bare ground. When you do that, what walks toward you? What a great, isn't that a fabulous question? When you stop and just stand on the ground, what walks toward you? We're so self-centered. Think about what comes to you? That's the way. That mystery which cannot be expressed, or explained, or anticipated, which until the moment it appears is by nature unimaginable to you. The way is the willingness to seek that, and nothing short of that. So once again, uncompromising, but I don't know about you, but explain to me, why does this sound appealing to me? Because it does. It sounds beautiful and exquisite and appealing, rather than horrifying. Why is that?
Because it's a huge adventure.
It's a huge adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so would be some horrible things, you know.
Well, there's horrible things on the way. And
That's true, but I mean, like going to the South Pole, I would think would be like a huge adventure. But I actually
Really
wouldn't want to do
cold.
it. You know, it's like I don't like that, being that cold, and plus it's dangerous. You could die.
But
So it
then
is a
there'd
huge.
be the adventure of, my goodness, I could die. I mean, I don't know, my life's been full of a lot of stuff I had to look at as an adventure.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Just to get through it.
And maybe I'm just enchanted by the language.
I think it just speaks to a longing that everybody has.
Yeah, there's a longing in there that she's attempting to put in words that doesn't fit in words, and yet, what's the longing?
To get familiar with that mystery, I think, or to know it somehow.
And why would you long to do that? It's not like a curiosity, but the longing is deeper.
Yeah.
What's that? I mean, you're onto something. I agree with you. I'm trying to decide how you would say it or even approach that. It after a while, for me, it becomes a non-negotiable. It's like I can't not. And there's something about the elegant kind of way that she strips away things with language. It leaves you bare, and with the world coming to you. It's like Dogen's body and mind drop away, you're being verified or actualized by the myriad things. There's something about that isn't just interesting, but almost life-giving or life-saving along that way. It made me think of a story, which now I have to tell because I'm thinking of it and it doesn't go out of my head. It's a particularly random story in a way, but a friend of mine who's just recently retired lives in Lafayette, Louisiana, and his job was he was a helicopter pilot, and mostly he flew the oil rigs in the Gulf. That was his job. But there are other things that he did in his piloting days, and one of them was they took some fairly sophisticated helicopters, disassembled them in part, not totally, so they could be put on ships and taken to Antarctica, reassembled, and then flown to the scientific stations to take people, scientists, and to the South Pole. And so it was quite a remarkable adventure to get there and do that, and even more an adventure to fly in those circumstances when one could fly. And there were times in which they had them there not just to get back and forth, they had them because they would go on missions. And he would take the scientists to certain areas they were going to study and drop them off. And then he just would have to wait. And so there you are in unbelievably cold weather that the equipment could barely survive in, and him, and nothing. That was his seat. That's what I thought was interesting. And he told me this in a Dharma discussion. And he said one day he was sitting on a big chunk of ice waiting. And of course everything is completely silent except the wind and various odd ways in which the light plays off all of that. And suddenly he saw something moving, and here, out of nowhere, comes a little penguin. And he said he just sat there like one does. You know, if you're sitting, and he said the penguin came right between his feet, looked at him, and then laid down and went to sleep. And sometime later, like an hour, I mean, he'd want to move. He's still sitting. So this is his zazen. You know, the little bird stands up, looks back at him, and then walks away. Isn't that remarkable?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the simplest thing, but it's like, wow. So he's in a place where everything is stripped away. There's pretty much nothing. What walks toward you? Unhindered life. This is not afraid, because what's in front doesn't know to be afraid of. It's not a sea lion or something. It's going to eat it. And that it would just seek out a moment of warmth and connection, which is what we do. And then go on in its world. So it's, I don't know why I said adventure to the South Pole, and that came because it's actually precisely that the unconscious, or the Lord, works in mysterious ways for these things.
I wanted to say that it's interesting that animals do that, because I've been meditating like on the deck when I lived in Georgetown, and a deer just was right there.
They come.
And at home when I sit, my cats just keep rubbing on me. It's just, I have to
They like that.
sit in my room. Yeah, and when I want to do things like put their, one of them reads my mind, so sometimes takes me to sit for a long time, so she doesn't know that I want to put the anti-flea thing on her. But boy, it's like, and then wait until she comes and rubs and I can grab her. But but many times I have to start over again because she feels it.
Just like
I
your
mean,
mind,
it's,
you know?
It's amazing. I mean, I haven't done anything yet. I mean, I just thought about it. It's unbelievable what, I guess.
Well, and the same things happen inside. If you're quiet and still enough, parts of you that you're unfamiliar with or they're frightened or shy will show themselves. If you look down at the bottom of the page, just this further note about this mystery, which you were calling out for. So we found ourselves at this point in the saga. We're in a modest room that can contain 32,000 lion thrones, and anybody walking by on the street wouldn't know. What do you think people think this place is? Each of us, in our ordinary householder's life, is that room, with all its beauty, richness, despair, difficulty, tragedy, and triumph going on inside. Isn't that a beautiful analogy? It's like the extravagant imagery that comes through these Mahayana texts is always about who and what we are. We are that room, what looks modest and ordinary, like all of us do in our own way, and yet we're this indescribable mystery.
So if a stranger looked through the window and saw a city, they wouldn't see what's going on inside. I mean, they wouldn't see all that stuff.
As it happens in the sutra. That's why the Buddha or the goddess will suddenly do their magic so you can see the way they see. It's like, whoa, dude, that's too much, and then you have to go back. The people who walk by probably wouldn't be too daunted if they saw us all sitting. What really freaks them out is they see us walking. The Night of the Living Dead. But I love this description. And the practice questions that I wanted to bring up about the seat bit before we go on. There's a little practice that I sometimes offer people that I'm working with in practice discussion when they're really stuck on some sort of ambivalence. Can't decide which way to go. They don't know what to do. And often what we'll do is use our intellect to try to decide pros and cons, what's best, so we can home in on the right decision. But practice doesn't home in. It opens us up. So the opening goes like this. You make a statement, pardon me, about your practice intention. If your practice intention is some things, let's make it this one. I now take up the practice of taking the Buddha's seat. I'm going to take my seat. Then there's 3 endings to the sentence. And each ending is open-ended. Therefore, it can have a million branches. Now that I've decided to sit, I have to start listening. You don't have to do it right now. Now that I've decided, I'm going to take my seat. I have to. Second one? Okay, now that I've decided to take my seat, I get to. On and on and on and on. And third, now that I've decided to take my seat, I'm afraid. So, I have to is the responsibility. The get to is the opportunity. The afraid, of course, is the barrier of fears, the blocks. And this then opens up many, many ways of exploring this possibility instead of trying to find out whether I should sit or not. Because you could do the other side. You could say, now that I've decided never to sit again, I have to, and seriously, you could answer that question. I have to not notice that I'm suffering, I have to stay away from the zendo, I have to, Now that I've decided I'll never sit, and I get to sleep in, and now that I'm never going to sit again, I'm afraid I'll suffer in the same old way the rest of my life. But, So it doesn't matter which side you land on. You can explore it, you can open it, put more life into it, walk more deeply into the mystery. So I just wanted to offer you those as good practice prompts, because they're always useful when you find yourself. So that's the Yogi Berra thing, you know, you see a fork in the road, take it. This is taking it, not choose which one to take. So let's look at section number 8. So when everybody arrives, they all get a chair, all 32,000 of them, and a 10 by 10 room. Now, first off, realizing that all these beings have come along, the retinue of disciples and bodhisattvas, Manjushri asked Vimalakirti where everybody's going to sit, because he sees this is definitely going to be a problem. And that's when the question arises. Page 75, if you're reading in Burton, it says, at that time, Shariputra, observing that there were no seats in Vimalakirti's room. Remember, he cleared everything out?
Mm-hmm.
You know, he took everything out except the bed. Thought to himself, all these bodhisattvas and major disciples, where are they going to sit? The rich man, Vimalakirti, knowing what was in his mind, said to Shariputra, did you come here for the sake of the Dharma, or are you just looking for a place to sit? I translate the Dharma the law thing. And Shariputra says, I came for the Dharma, not for a seat. Ah, Shariputra, says Vimalakirti. The seeker of the Dharma doesn't concern himself even about life or limb. So he goes into all the descriptions of what Sutherland was just describing. But at the bottom of that page, if you happen to be looking at it, it says, to declare that one must recognize suffering, renounce attachments, realize how to reach extinction, and practice the way is mere idle theorizing, not seeking the Dharma. What? You mean it's more than that? To declare that one must recognize suffering, renounce attachments, realize how to reach extinction, and practice the way is mere idle theorizing, not seeking the Dharma. So where is he taking him? He said, Shariputra, the Dharma is called tranquil extinction. But if one strives for birth followed by extinction, this is seeking birth, and it goes on to this sort of crazy language about what you're trying to reach or not. The Vimalakirti then, in fact on page 77, it says, the rich man Vimalakirti that exercised his transcendental powers, and at once the Buddha dispatched 32,000 lion seats, tall, broad, adorned, and pure, and had them brought into Vimalakirti's room, where the bodhisattvas, major disciples, Indras, Brahmas, 4 heavenly kings, and the others saw something they had never seen before. For the room was broad and spacious enough to hold all of this. What is this referring to? I'll make it really silly. Think you can pack all the Buddhist teachings in you? As long as you think you have to take them in, that you have to seek the way, remember? I've got to learn about this, and I've got to read all of Dogen, and I have to memorize the Pali Canon, and I'm going to practice, and I have to do this. Should I do the Tibetan? And Vimalakirti is saying, guess what? If you quietly turn and look, it's all there. There's no having to take in, there's no having to create. It's all there. And vast, vast, vast storehouses of knowledge and compassion are what you are. And that's what this is symbolizing, I think. But of course, because it's still in human form, lower on the page it says, but Shariputra, layman, these seats are too tall and wide, we can't climb up in them. So the regular folks see these Dharma seats and they're like, do you remember Lily Tomlin and the big? That's what I thought of. Very irreverent. And Vimalakirti said, Shariputra, if you will make obeisance to the thus come one, Sumaru King, which means the Buddha, then you'll be able to take a seat. So here are these ordinary people attempting to take the Dharma seat of the teacher or the king. They're trying to get up on these big seats, and they can't do it. And instead of telling them how to strive to do it, Vimalakirti says, just basically bow to the Buddha. Just let yourself go. Make obeisance, make homage to Buddha, but Buddha isn't there. So who are they making obeisance to? Their own true nature. And then suddenly they can climb up. That's not how it's written, of course. It's written in the metaphor. And so this, of course, is beyond comprehension. Number one, that all these people could be stuffed in there, plus all the furniture. And then the furniture is so outlandish, you can't even get on it. And then suddenly you have the capacity to engage with the Dharma in that way. It's like, this is getting really interesting. Beyond comprehension. Which is appropriate because that which can be comprehended isn't what's being pointed to. Are there any other things that you saw in this chapter that you wanted to point to? Anybody? I don't know if you read it ahead of time or not.
What came to mind is, this is a silly thing as well, what came to mind when I was reading about the 32,000 people, I was thinking that is Peg's hope. All 32,000, we fit here.
I was talking with David Chadwick back in the 90s, right after he had published Cookie Cucumber. And he said he was flying across the country with Suzuki Roshi one time. This is a attendant. And Suzuki Roshi was looking out the window of the airplane. And you know how it looks. And David said, what are you seeing? He said, I see little zendos everywhere.
I see little zendos everywhere.
So there's a long description about what it means to be free. And there's this great line, and you don't have to look it up, but on page 80 where Vimalakirti says, Shariputra, I've just now briefly described the powers possessed by this bodhisattva of the emancipation beyond comprehension. If I were to describe them in full, I could go on for a whole kalpa and never be done. So he's just saying, how could you reach the end of the description if the bodhisattva is beyond comprehension? This is beyond what you can think about. Your mind won't reach the end of it. And yet you can, not only can you embody it, that's not even the right thing to say, because that would mean you could embody something. Your embodiment is it. Today in Inquiry we were talking about calling forward Avalokiteshvara or Kanzeon, or the Bodhisattva of compassion. Our care that arises as we care for each other is the arising of that bodhisattva. And same with this wisdom, what we're doing right now. So we're in the room, got the seats. And I think I had you maybe print out the silent illumination, Hangji. So you have that? And the reason I did But that's what I wanted to do is see the echoes later in Chan Buddhism in China that became Zen, that began in these early Buddhist teachings in this sutra. So you can see how it resonated into Chan and then into Zen, this bodhisattva beyond comprehension. So if you have this Izan Hongji, there are 3 pieces that I've pulled out that we've used before. Hongji, you can see, was from the 11th to 12th century China, and he called his practice silent illumination. If you were to talk about it in old Indian Buddhist terms in this sutra, it would be shamatha vipassana. Shamatha is the silent part, the calm abiding. Vipassana is insight, what's illuminated. But the sort of Taoist Chinese is silent illumination. I don't know what the original words were, but that's what they've been. Does someone want to read this first one for us? I've been reading for a bit here. Please. The bright boundless field.
Bright, boundless field. The field of boundless emptiness is what exists from the very beginning. You must pacify, cure, grind down, or brush away all the tendencies you have fabricated into apparent habits. Then you can reside in the clear light of brightness. Utter emptiness has no image. Upright independence does not rely on anything. Just expand and illuminate the original truth, unconcerned by external conditions. Accordingly, we are told to realize that not a single thing exists. In this field, birth and death do not appear. The deep source, transparent down to the bottom, can radiantly shine and can respond unencumbered to each speck of dust without becoming its partner. The subtlety of seeing and hearing transcends mere colors and sounds. The whole affair functions without leaving traces and mirrors without obscurations. Very naturally, mind and harmless emerge and harmonize. An ancient said that non-mind enacts and fulfills the way of non-mind. Enacting and fulfilling the way of non-mind, you can really rest. Proceeding, you are able to guide the assembly. With thoughts clear, sitting silently, wander into the center of the circle and wander. This is how you must penetrate and study.
Wander into the center of the circle and wonder. Isn't that amazing? The whole thing is quite beautiful.
Yes.
Expression of emptiness.
Mm.
And this is the beyond comprehension that Vimalakirti is pointing to. So if that's the bright, boundless field, what's the practice of true reality? Someone read that one. Anne, you want to read? You look like you were signaling it.
The practice of true reality is simply to sit serenely in silent introspection. When you have fathomed this, you cannot be turned around by external causes and conditions. This empty, wide open mind is subtly and correctly illuminating, spacious and content, without confusion from inner thoughts of grasping, effectively overcome habitual behavior and realize the self that is not possessed by emotions. You must be broad-minded, whole without relying on others. Such upright, independent spirit can begin not to pursue degrading situations. Here you can rest and become clean, pure, and lucid. Bright and penetrating, you can immediately return, accord, and respond to deal with events. Everything is unhindered, clouds gracefully floating up to the peaks, the moonlight glitteringly flowing down mountain streams. The entire place is brightly illuminated and spiritually transformed, totally unobstructed and clearly manifesting responsive interaction like box and lid or arrow points meeting. Continuing, cultivate and nourish yourself to enact maturity and achieve stability. If you accord everywhere with thorough clarity and cut off sharp corners without dependence on doctrines like the white bull or wildcat, helping to arouse wonder, you can be called a complete person. So we hear that this is how one on the way of non-mind acts. But before realizing non-mind, we still have great hardship.
Now you tell me. Once again, it's a kind of a beautiful description of these things. And I'll, this last one, let's go ahead and just read it to complete this. Someone else like to read? Yes, please. So here's your practice description up here. Face everything, let go, attain stability.
Oh, that's easy.
Just that.
Vast and far-reaching without boundary, secluded and pure, manifesting light, this spirit is without obstruction. Its brightness does not shine out, but can be called empty and inherently radiant. Its brightness, inherently purifying, transcends causal conditions beyond subject and object. Subtle but preserved, illumined and vast. Also, it cannot be spoken of as being or non-being, or discussed with images or calculations. Right in here, the central point turns, the gateway opens.
It's a great little sentence, isn't it? Central point turns, the gateway opens.
You accord and respond without laboring, and accomplish without hindrance. Everywhere turn around freely, not following conditions, not falling into classifications. Facing everything, let go and attain stability. Stay with that just as that. Stay with this just as this. That and this are mixed together with no discriminations as to their places. So it is said that the earth lifts up the mountain without knowing the mountain's stark steepness. A rock contains jade without knowing the jade's flawlessness. This is how truly to leave home, how home leaving must be enacted.
So you can see how this is mini retreats of study, just this little bit, but it's quite beautiful. Take it, read it, ponder some of these things. It's a beautiful description. And I just wanted to give you a flavor of how it began to echo and to chant out of the Indian sutra. If you look on page 76, you need it because it's in here really, but Vimalakirti tells Shariputra the Dharma is called tranquil extinction. And what we just read is silent illumination and about this extinction. It's very, very, very close. Shariputra, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have an emancipation that is called beyond comprehension. In the Shin Shin Ming, we see things that are very, very similar. And I've listed I've accepted just this piece of the Shin Shin Ming here for you to reflect on. The enlightened of all times and places have entered into this truth, in it there is no gain or loss. One instant is 10,000 years. There is no here, no there. Infinity is right before your eyes. The tiny is as large as the vast when objective boundaries have vanished. The vast is as small as the tiny when you don't have external limits. Being is aspect of non-being. Non-being is no different from being. Until you understand this truth, you won't see anything clearly. I love that. Until you understand this truth, it's like, what the hell did you just say?
What page are you on?
Page
What?
2.
I'm on page 2, the bottom of page 2. And once again, I gave you these just to give you further expressions. And we won't read it either, but I had you look at Lungchimpa. So this is Tibetan. version of the same kind of beautiful speech. But this one is so great, I used it in one of the other classes where, in this case, it's like the emptiness is talking back to you. Instead of a person describing the great boundless field, here's the great boundless field talking back. All that is has me. Universal creativity, pure and total presence as its root. How things appear is my being. How things arise is my manifestation. It's kind of shocking to hear it spoken like that, isn't it? It's quite beautiful. Take this one home and use it as your meditation, because it will speak to you in a bit of a different way, I think. How does the Bodhisattva regard living beings? This is a big question. How does the Bodhisattva understand and come to be with living beings? And he starts, as a conjurer looks on the beings he conjures up, thus does the Bodhisattva regard living beings. As the wise view the moon in the water, or a face or form seen in a mirror, as shimmers of heat in a torrid season, as the echoes that follows the cry, clouds in the sky, foam on the water, bubbles on the water. He's really saying the same thing that comes at the end of the Diamond Sutra. Everything is evanescent, everything is independent, it's ephemeral. That's how Bodhisattvas regard living beings, is these beautiful expressions, which Longchenpa was saying, everything that appears is me, expressing itself. We're the ornaments of emptiness, pouring itself out in expression of this, and this, and this, and this, and this, that can take a seat, which is beyond comprehension. As forms, the third paragraph, as forms in the world of formlessness. We are forms in the world of formlessness, as sprouts from charred grain. And he goes on to describe a few of these things, but at the top of page 84, Manjushri says, if the Bodhisattva looks at beings in this way, which is kind of esoteric and strange, like as if they're not quite anything, then how can he treat them with compassion? Like how does this come in the ground in relationships? How does this stuff show up? Because you're talking about emptiness here, and it doesn't seem like we're going to get too much traction in real relationships. And Vimalakirti replied, when the Bodhisattva has finished regarding them in this way, he thinks to himself, or to herself, for the sake of living beings, I must preach this Dharma to them. This is true compassion. He treats them with a compassion of tranquil extinction, for it results in no birth. Treats them with a compassion unburning, for it is void of earthly desires. Treats them with a compassion that is impartial. He goes on a long list of... the way I was reading it, at least in my own practice reflection, was that suppose you practice and you begin to actually enter the experience of understanding impermanence and interdependence, that you really settle into a kind of a samadhi or a shamatha kind of way in which you can apprehend this emptiness thing. You can really feel the extinction of mind and open to spaciousness. That would be a terrible place to stay.
Can you repeat that?
It would be a terrible place to stay in tranquil emptiness, because you can't help anybody. Because you're totally separate. You're out there. So, when the Bodhisattva has finished, for the sake of living beings, I will make contact. I'll do something. I'll offer myself. That's the beginning of the Bodhisattva turn. Otherwise, you just say, I'm enlightened, I'll take off, I'm finished with this lifetime, no more birth and death, I'm good. The rest of you suckers, good luck. No, you've never had that thought. Because you realize that taking care of others would be taking care of yourself. Because if you actually had that view, you'd understand there's no separation. It was a very interesting place in the middle of page 85 where it says, continuing his questioning, Manjushri asked Vimalakirti, what do you mean when you speak of pity? Apparently he talked about pity a little bit in here, so I just picked up on that. He says, I mean that whatever benefits the Bodhisattva gains, he shares them with all other living beings. Which no matter what he gains, or she gains, she offers it back. And then Manjushri says, what do you mean by joy? Well, any way the Bodhisattva can aid or enrich others, he does. What do you mean by indifference? And he goes through this whole cycle of asking, what do you mean by? What do you mean by? What do you mean by? And he begins to spell out all of these things about how Bodhisattva regards living beings. And right at the bottom of page 86, it says, at that time, there's a heavenly being, a goddess, in Vimalakirti's room. So she must have like slipped in. Since there was so much space. Seeing these great men and hearing them expound the law and the Dharma, proceeded to make herself visible. And taking heavenly flowers, scattered them over the bodhisattvas and major disciples. So she's in there, she's watching these guys. It's like, oh, geez, you know. So I'm going to make myself visible, and I'm going to spread these flowers on everybody. When the flowers touched the bodhisattvas, they all fell to the floor at once. But when they touched the major disciples, they stuck to them and did not fall off. The disciples all tried to shake off the flowers through their supernatural powers, but they couldn't do so. At that time, the goddess said to Shariputra, why try to brush off the flowers? Such flowers are not in accordance with the Dharma, he replied. That's why I try to brush them off. And the goddess says, you know, she's setting them up. Leading them down the path. Don't say these flowers are not in accordance with the Dharma. Why? Because flowers make no such distinction. Now she's going to go back and teach the same stuff that Vimalakirti just taught. You and your thinking have made up these distinctions. That's all. It's a dream, buddy. If one who has left the household life to follow the Buddha's way makes such distinctions, that's what's not in accordance with the Dharma. One must be without distinctions to be in accordance with the Dharma. Look at the bodhisattvas. The flower didn't stick to them. And so she goes on, and finally, because she's describing this stuff, finally Shariputra says, Goddess, have you been staying in this room long? See, now he's suspicious. Like, have you been listening to everything we said? And she said, Venerable Sir, my stay in this room is about as long as your attainment of emancipation. She's reeling him in further. You know, it's like, he should have kept his mouth shut. He was already in trouble, now he's going to get in deeper trouble. It's like, have you been around here long? And she said, about as long as your attainment of emancipation. Top of page 88. So you've been here a long time. Venerable Sir, the goddess said, how long has your attainment of emancipation been? Shariputra was silent, did not answer. He's getting smarter. Don't say anything. The goddess said, with your great wisdom, reeling him in again. You know, the woman's always going to say anything, oh, your great wisdom, you know. Venerable Sir, why do you remain silent? Shariputra says, emancipation cannot be spoken of in words. Therefore, I do not know what I can say to you. The goddess says, words, writing are all marks of emancipation. Why? Because emancipation is not internal, not external, and not in between. See, no matter what he says, she's going to pull the rug out to help him open, to help him continue to let go. And words likewise are not internal, not external. Therefore, Shariputra, you can speak of emancipation without putting words aside. Why? Because all things that exist are marks of emancipation. Wow, now she turns it around. All things that exist are actually marks of emancipation. That's one of the things that's unbelievable about this sutra. Almost every question and answer interaction turns something that you think, oh, that's clear. And it's like, no, but you get caught on this. Oh, that's the, no, actually you get caught on that. It keeps turning us away from places we want to land and have certainty and understanding. It keeps opening it further and deeper.
It's clearly anti-discriminatory.
What's that?
It's clearly anti-discriminatory.
Absolutely. And she also will say there's nothing wrong with discrimination. It was like you can't land. The Buddha, the goddess said, the Buddha, addressing persons of overbearing arrogance, asserting that one must put aside lewdness, anger, and stupidity. Hey!
Welcome back.
The goddess is in the room. That's how we just started. You want to join us? You're going to rest.
No, I'll come.
Come on in.
Let me grab my book.
Oh, yeah.
Question it.
How long has she been this
How long was she listening?
How long has she been there? And I have to say, this is really kind of crude, but in this part I was just going to read, I couldn't help but think about our current president. The goddess said, the Buddha, addressing persons of overbearing arrogance, asserting that one must put aside lewdness, anger, and stupidity in order to gain emancipation, that is all. If he was addressing those who were free of overbearing arrogance, the Buddha asserted that the nature of lewdness, anger, and stupidity is emancipation itself. Now, what? These are marks of emancipation? And Shariputra, wising up even further, says, excellent, excellent, goddess, you did a good job, you know. And they go about this sort of discourse, which is interesting and complex. But on page 90, they've gone through all of this stuff, and about 3/4 of the way down, Shariputra sticks his foot in again. He says to the goddess, why don't you change out of your female body?
Oh.
What was he thinking? And the goddess replied, for the past 12 years, I've been trying to take on female form, but in the end with no success. What is there to change? But what? If the sorcerer were to conjure up a phantom woman, and then someone asked her why she didn't change out of her female form, would that be any kind of reasonable question? No, Shariputra, phantoms have no fixed form. So what would there be to change? And she's loosening up this whole idea of gender. She says all things are just the same. They have no fixed form. So why ask why I don't change out of my female form? Then she gets him. At that time, the goddess employed her supernatural powers to change Shariputra into a goddess like herself. Try this, buddy. While she took on Shariputra's form. Then she asked, why don't you change out of this female body? Shariputra, now in the form of a goddess, replied, I don't know why I've suddenly changed and taken on a female body. The goddess said, Shariputra, if you can change out of this female body, then all women can change likewise. Shariputra, who is not a woman, appears in a woman's body. And the same is true of all women. Though they appear in women's bodies, they are not women. Therefore, the Buddha teaches that all phenomena are neither male nor female. Boom. Stop this distinction, not male and female. Then the goddess withdrew her supernatural powers, and Shariputra returned to his original form. It's like spiritual transgender. The goddess said to Shariputra, where now is the form and shape of your female body? You were just a female, where is it now? And Shariputra says, the form and shape of my female body does not exist, yet does not exist. the goddess says, all things are just like that. They do not exist, yet they do not exist. And that they do not exist, yet do not exist, is exactly what the Buddha teaches. I just love this interaction. Because she's really using a lot of power to show him something that he couldn't have gotten just intellectually, but by changing his body and by helping him see these different perspectives, he's opened a bit. Let's see, there's another place. I want to reference, because he makes one more big mistake.
That's kind of his role in life.
Hmm?
Shariputra, that's kind of his role, is to make mistakes.
Yeah, and he does a good job of it.
In most of the Mahayana Sutras.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have the quote here, so we don't need to, where it says having a view, and it says the important thing is to recognize that what we have is a view, and views are provisional and impermanent. They rise and fall. We can explore a view, and it ought to be subject to new evidence. At any given moment, it's our best guess, which is pretty much what we get in life. I mean, decent guess. The goddess is reminding us that duality doesn't actually exist in the world around us. It exists in our minds. Duality is something our mind does with the world. Isn't that a great sentence? It's like, oh, got it. This is what she's trying to, and she's using male-female as one of the dualities to teach. And this last little bit about waking up from Sutherland, does somebody want to read that one?
I'll read it.
Okay. Everything comes
from waking up. Everything comes from the same dark. Everything is filled with the same light. Which isn't to say that everything is completed just yet. There is still more horror and viciousness than it's possible almost to bear.
That's a great sentence too.
But aren't those the very things most in need of inclusion in this agonizingly slow, grievously uneven awakening? The move from private Buddha, major disciples, to Bodhisattva means that we vow to wake up in the world, for the world, and with the world. Everything partakes in our dreams of awakening, about being on the boat together. What changes is our perception, our ability to know and experience that. Instead of asking about how to get back on the boat when we feel as though we're off, we're asking why we're not feeling, we're asking why we're not feeling the planks under our feet. How can you return to intimacy with what is already true?
Why can't we just get our feet back on the ground and feel ourselves right where we are? And this is the teaching that we repeat here all the time. Waking up in the world, for the world. And then in chapter 8, we're going to just speak about one more tonight, the Buddha way. This thing is chock full of teaching. It starts with Manjushri asking his requisite question to open the chapter. How does the Bodhisattva go about mastering the Buddha way? The chapter before was how does the Bodhisattva regard living beings? And now how does the Bodhisattva go about mastering the Buddha way? And Vimalakirti says the Bodhisattva should follow a path that is not the way. Then he can master the Buddha way. Well, how does the Bodhisattva follow a path that is not the way? And then there's some fairly archaic language in some of this about traditional Buddhist realms of existence, which gets a little opaque in a way. But one of the things that I thought was useful on page 95 at the top, it says, Manjushri, by going to places that are the opposite of the way, in this fashion, which you just spoken about, the Bodhisattva is able to master the Buddha way. And Vimalakirti then asks Manjushri, what may act as the seeds of becoming a Buddha. Thus come one. I think this is another situation in which Vimalakirti is saying the way that you think is going to purify you and make you a Buddha is probably not the way. Because over and over and over he says, keep coming back into the world. Keep coming back into where you're living right now. Keep coming back into the body. Keep coming back into your relationships. And so then Vimalakirti asks, after saying that, well, it's like, what are the seeds then? And at the bottom of that paragraph, it says, to sum up, I love this, when you find a sentence that says to sum it up, the 62 erroneous views and all the different kinds of earthly desires are all the seeds of the Buddha. All the stuff that most of us think you got to throw out. And so, he says, what do you mean by that? And at the bottom of that next paragraph, it is only when living beings are in the midst of the mire of earthly desires that they turn to the Dharma. The super simple, dumb-headed, mundane way that I experience this is retreats that I go into in which I feel confused and not so good are the ones that I get the most out of. And the retreats I go in feeling spacious and wonderful and full of energy, I'm kind of like, it's something about actually facing the difficulties that are the way. And I know that's kind of dumb-headed to think about that, but it's kind of how it goes. For me, a good bit of the time. And then there's a place where, let's see, I want to make a point here. Vimalakirti says, only when living beings are in the midst of the mire of earthly desires that they turn. If you plant seeds in the sky, they will never grow. You've got to plant them. And so what it's referring to is that chant we do all the time about live like a cloud in the endless sky, like a lotus in muddy water, one with the pure mind. It's that lotus in muddy water thing that they're beginning to teach. Now, you can see on the notes it says, at this point, a bodhisattva named universally manifested physical body, that's his name, asked Vimalakirti about his family, his friends, and his employees. And Vimalakirti responds, not with a tweet, but with a long verse, which goes from page 96 to 103. You know, we're not going to read the whole thing here. But listen to just a few lines. Wisdom is the bodhisattva's mother. Expedient means his father. And those who guide and teach all beings, there are none not born of these. Dharma joy is his wife. Pity and compassion of mind are his daughters. The good mind and sincerity his sons. Final emptiness and tranquility his dwelling. So he goes about describing these kind of wonderful qualities that we seek and say, this is your family. So we heard that all the Dharma is actually here, even though it seems impossible. It's beyond conceptualization. And what we're made of is the very thing that we're trying to seek. And I make a little note here. See, it says guided meditation. Mm-hmm. There's a meditation that you've heard some of you have heard me guide us on at times, because I keep coming back to it. It came to me one time years ago when I was asked to lead just a morning meditation at the Leadership Pilgrimage. We were found at, where were we out there? Canyon of the Eagles, years ago. And I thought to myself, you know, we read all this wonderful poetry and we read these things in the sutras, and we always think, what in the heck do those people do? How do they get that way? And they did exactly what we're doing. You know, they'd sit, and they would study, and they would work together and live together. They didn't do something kind of like this, they did it exactly. We're doing exactly what they did. But then the next objection is always, yeah, but they were like special. Which is the most grievous error of all. Every one of those amazing folks that was born, had a body, had to live with their family, were subject to illness, old age, death if they were lucky. They had to live usually in pretty terrible conditions, and they ended up dying at some point. All the ingredients that we have and the practices are exactly the same. You are not any different. And to think that you are will take you way away from the very place that you long, that yearning that we started with, to reach, not knowing that it's right here in this little room with everybody and everything that you need right here. So once again, it's a bit of a cursory glance, but I hope it's lively enough to take us through. We have one more class in which we'll see where they go from here and how they wrap up the season. This is like a Netflix, you know.
In 7 seconds, yeah.
And it has such a remarkable trajectory and such a beautiful imagery and stories that keeps on cutting away these things that we think we're going to grab onto, that's going to give us what we want, or that's going to take us out of the difficulty. It's going to get us out of this insane world. It's going to get us out of this difficulty that we're not. This is where it is. So on a lighter note, I'm going to show you something to end on. And this is sort of a goddess in the house thing. Someone who showed up, took her seat, was unafraid to ask the difficult questions, and actually challenged everyone else who had difficulties, who overcame them, who wasn't trapped in female form, and yet is completely female, who plays the game that we all are struggling with right now, and offers herself for the benefit of others. It's explicitly political, just on election day. Let's go ahead and just have one. I'm going to show you two 2-minute clips. That's all it is. Those of you that are watching the recording, you'll get the link so you can watch them on your laptop at home, because you won't be able to see them here. And so just because we have a few minutes, there's no reason to shift everything. If you just want to stand around, we'll watch it at the TV.